this video will be for advanced players and even masters, because we will talk about one of the most complicated endgame patterns that can happen on your games. So if you started last month or even last week, first I suggest you to see the elementary checkmates. Then, for example, bishop plus knight, we have this here on this channel, and then see this video. Of course, if you want, you can always assist, but you need to have the correct mindset, because this is pretty advanced, but is very useful for every kind of players, because to know this checkmate pattern will help you to improve your middle game and coordination between the knights. So let's jump to our video. But before that, did you know that almost 87% of the viewers isn't subscribed? Why don't you like me? I'm a great person and my goal is you. I want to help you. To do that, you just need to subscribe. It's free, it's easy, and you will help a lot this channel to grow. With your help, I will continue doing content every day. So my goal is to have a channel that can help really every kind of player, since a beginner until a master level player. So don't forget, please subscribe, and if you have any question or any suggestions, you can always put on the comments, or you can talk with me by chess.com. My nickname is dark_attack. So let's jump to our video. So when we talk about this checkmate pattern, first, of course, we will need to see why. Why? This is pretty rare. Checkmate with two knights or checkmate with two knights against a pawn is pretty rare. Why do we need that? Simple. If you know this checkmate pattern, you will improve your endgame technique, and you will improve a lot your middle game, because you will know better how to coordinate your knights. You will know better how to triangulate with your king. And this is very important. These are very important concepts, because knowing that will make you stronger than 95 or 96% of the players. So it's very important. Of course, this is advanced checkmate pattern, but with some practice and goodwill, you will learn always this pattern, okay? So to start, we need to know what is the checkmate pattern we will apply. Of course, first, can we win with two knights against the king? Yes or no? Here, for example, white has played and has gave check, and black has two different approaches or alternatives. One is bad and the other one is good. And very important, if you're playing against a lone king, if he plays correctly, the game is completely draw. You won't be able to win the game. You just can win this game if he commits a blunder. So in this case, of course, if black plays king to c1, this is completely equal. You won't be able to win this game, because, well, it isn't. I will explain on the next exercise. So it is only possible against a lone king to win if he commits a blunder and pushes his king to the corner. And of course, knight to c2 will give checkmate. This is the first aspect. And that's the reason we are seeing two knights against the pawn, because two knights against a lone king, and you won't be able to win the game. Next position, very important concept too. Here is white to play, and white has played king to c1. What do you think about this position? Is this winnable or is this draw? The pawn is moving on this direction, and the answer is that this position is completely draw. Black isn't able to win this game. Why is that? Simple. Because the knight cannot lose tempos. And this is very important too. Because of the fact that the knight cannot lose tempos, we will need to win this game, we will need to lose tempos with our king. To do that, we will need to do triangulations with our king. We have this content here on the channel. So before we start to the exercises, we need to know to the studies about this endgame of two knights against one pawn. And first I will show you the Troitsky because it's very important because of the last technologies of the engines, computers, table bases. Müller has corrected the Troitsky's concept. And the initial idea of Troitsky was that if, for example, white is playing with a lone pawn, and if the pawn is on the red squares or green squares, the game will be winnable for black. So if you're playing with black and your opponent has one pawn on the red squares or green squares, you will be able to win. But the thing is that with the table bases, Müller said that no, this isn't true. I'm going to show first the position for black, just you to know. I've put the red because the red squares are the line of Troitsky and then Müller's. And don't forget, I will repeat, if black, on this case, has one pawn, one lone pawn, of course, and white has the king plus two knights, if the pawn is on one of those squares, the game is winnable, said by Troitsky. But because of the table bases, Carsten Müller has thought, no, forget about this. Because the pawns on this rank, and of course, on this case, on this rank, aren't possible to win. Because according to table bases, you will need, if black plays correctly on this case, you will need 115 moves to win the game with checkmate. Because of the fact that on the official rules of chess says that you need, on the maximum cases, 50 moves to win the game, you won't be able to win if the pawns are on those ranks. For this reason, you will want to apply the Müller's line. So Müller's has removed the first rank. So if we see the white's case is like that, so it's easy to know because you need to know just that the exceptions are the squares on b4 and g4 in the case of white. And in the case of black is on g5 and b5. It's pretty simple, okay? Don't forget, we are talking about the case where, in this case, black has one pawn and white has the two knights. If the pawn is on the red squares or green squares, you will be able to win the game, okay? It's pretty simple. So for now, we've already seen very important aspects. First, to win this game, you will need to put the king on the corner and you will want to apply our pattern. Next, you know that the knight isn't able to lose tempos. And because of that, you will want to triangulate with your king. And next, you will want to apply the Müller's line. Now, we will go to our exercises. And okay, we have 2 exercises and 3 real-life games. And 2 are draw and the other is win. And you will try to solve if the position is draw or if it's possible to win. So let's jump to our first exercise. And here we will be playing with white. So, of course, white has 2 knights and black has 1 pawn. And the first thing you will need to know is the position of your opponent's pawn. Very important. Exists always exceptions, and you need to be aware of that. So I've put it here, brief resume. So first, watch out for Troitsky's Müller's line. Second, you will need to do triangulation with your king. Third, pay attention to the knight coordination because the two knights will work together. It's very important because if you don't use the knights correctly, the pawn will advance, and don't forget, you cannot take this pawn because if you take the pawn, the game will be drawn. And of course, next you apply the checkmate pattern, putting the king on a corner, and be always be careful with the exceptions. So let's see. Very important. First, we need to see the position of this pawn. So the pawn is on d7. Let's see. Pawn on d7 is one of the pawns of our Müller's line. So because of the fact that this is a pawn on the line of the Müller, this is possible to win. Now, we need to see if our coordination is good. Yes, it's great because the knights are working together. Third, we need to see if the king is near a corner. Yes, is near the corner. Now we need to apply our checkmate. So very important. I talked about the triangulation, but of course the opposition is important too. So we will want to do opposition and the triangulation to win a tempo. So first, king to g5, because we don't want this king to go away from the corner, because we want to give this checkmate on the corner. Next, the king will play here because those squares aren't available. Yes, this one is possible too, but well, yeah, we can see later probably, but I think on the next variation, it's the same. So here, for example, king to g8, we will continue with our technique to push the king to the corner. Okay, let's go. Here, of course, it's possible to win with all of the moves, but this one I don't enjoy very much because we aren't doing opposition because it's black to play. And we want black to play his king in front of ours. And we want the king to be always on those squares to remove this knight and give the checkmate. So first we will push the king to h6. And of course, this isn't possible. King to f8. And now, very important, the knight is controlling this square, and this knight is controlling those two squares. So this dance is useful to push the king to the corner. So because of that, king g6, and I'm triangulating right now. And here, the king will go to g8. And now, very important, because of the fact that I want the king to be near the corner, and I want to remove the knight, giving checkmate, it's very important to push the king to this square. For this reason, we will play king to g5, trying to do another triangulation. For example, if king goes here, now I'm giving the opposition, and after this move, we play king e7. We are trying to push the king here. After, for example, king plays to h8, we will play king here. And now, okay, how can we win this game? Very important. The knight is controlling this square. And don't forget, he will need to advance the pawn if he doesn't have any available move for his king. So here we already can push the knight to e8. And we will try to apply our checkmate pattern. So, of course, I'm assuming that everyone will advance the pawn because black doesn't want to push the king to the corner. Or else knight plays here, and this will be easy to give checkmate. So here we give the checkmate, and now we have our pattern with knight here or knight here, because this square will give checkmate. So, for example, knight, pawn, and knight checkmate. So, okay. You're thinking, okay, this is pretty hard, but we will see another alternative. For example, we've seen those ideas, and imagine, we've seen the king playing to f8. What if king plays to h8? An alternative, for example. Here, we need to think about our approach. So, let's go. because of the fact we can't control this square, we need to work with our knights and our king. And we will triangulate. So let's go. King g6, king g8. Now again, do you know the technique? King g5, and we will triangulate again, because after king h8, we will play king f6, and we already have our possession. Very important. To apply this checkmate, you will need to calculate, and very important, you need to recognize the checkmate pattern. So we've already seen our first position. I hope this is easy for you. Please tell me later, because I want to know. I wanted to have your feedback after you see this video. So let's go to our second position. Okay, our second position is this one, sorry. And in this position, of course, we are playing with white, and this is pretty complicated because this pawn is very advanced. So first step, let's see if this pawn is on the Müller's line. So to do that, we see our Müller's line, and the pawn is on d3. Be wary of exceptions. This is an exception, and this is one of the reasons this checkmate is very complicated, because exists a lot of exceptions, and we need to calculate to know if this is an exception or not. Why is this an exception? It's pretty simple. The pawn is outside the Müller's line, but the thing is that this king is near the corner, and our knights are well coordinated. So because of this fact, if your opponent has the king near the corner, and if you have a good coordination and you have a good position for your king, you will be able to win this game. I'm thinking, for example, a case where I think Anatoly Karpov has lost an endgame against Topalov, I think. And he has lost a position of a king plus pawn against a king plus two knights. And the game was completely draw, but on those days, Karpov doesn't know the technique. And he has lost the game because he pushed his king to the corner. Basically, was that. So even Karpov, a genius on the endgames, has committed mistakes on this kind of endgames. So it's important to know this pretty well, because your middle game will improve a lot. So let's go. If you want, you can put on pause, and let's think a little bit. What is the best idea for white? Okay, we don't want this king to go far away from the corner. So first, we will need to play knight to c4. Why is that? Simple. Because the knight will control these squares, and after, for example, knight plays to b2, we will control this square, and this square is a square where the king can try to go out, and this square too. So right now, after knight to c4, this king is stuck in the corner. So, for example, after king tries to go away, we will play always the knight, and the knight is controlling the squares and the king too. So for this reason, the king is already stuck on the square on b1. Now we will need to work the position of the opponent's king. How will we do that? Our knights don't have the ability of losing tempos. So we will need to control the squares with the knight, and we will triangulate with our king. So first, let's control the c1 square, because this king wants to go here. So he has just two available squares. And now, let's go. If king plays to a1, I think is the most complicated approach to play. So here, we will need to triangulate with our king to give this checkmate. So we will play king c4, and after king, let's go king again. Don't forget, this square isn't available. And after king, we play king a3. We have the opposition. Now that we won the opposition, we play king to b3, and the king is on the corner. Now that the king is on the corner, we have checkmate. If you want, you can put on pause and think a little bit while I read the quote of Vasily Smyslov, one of the best endgame players ever. He has been world champion. In a knight's endgame, the pieces are like fireworks, sparkling and flying everywhere. Is this case? Because here we will play the knight. And after knight plays to e1, we already have checkmate. This example is spectacular and of course is an exception because of the position of our king, because of the position of the knights and the opponent's king. So here, after pawn advances, we will give check, and now this is forced mate. Are you seeing? It's pretty simple. After knight check, king here, knight here, he promotes, and we give checkmate. Very, very, very interesting, this position. So we've seen two different cases. One of these cases is with a pawn on the Müller's line, and the other one is outside the Müller's line. So this means that you will need to evaluate pretty well always everything and all the aspects of this endgame. And because of this reason, this will help you to improve your middle game. Now, we will analyze three positions. I have one goal for you. You need to answer if the position is winnable or not. So, the first position has been played between Andrei Lilienthal and Vasily Smyslov, the Great. And Lilienthal, in this game, well, he was playing with the pair of knights. So, first, if you want, you can put on pause the video. And this is the position that has been played on the game. And I want you to answer me. Is this position won, or is this a draw? So Smyslov is playing with white, and Lilienthal is playing with black. I've put it two games of Lilienthal because he, on I think 6 years, he has played 2 games that reached those positions. So the answer, it's simple. Let's see the pawn. So the pawn is on h5. So the pawn is outside the line of the Müller's line. So for this reason, this is a draw position. Very important. We need to evaluate if the other aspect is this. For example, the coordination of the knights. This knight is on f8 and this knight is on e2. They aren't coordinated. Because of that, you cannot win this position. You need to have a good position for the king. Yes, this is true. You need to have coordination and the pawn needs to be on the line. So, for this reason, this game is draw. I'm going to show what happened on the game, and Lilienthal, of course, draw this game. So he cannot push the coordination of the knights because of the pawn. The pawn is too advanced, and the knights don't have the ability of losing tempos. So he has continued for a few moves, I think 15 moves, and after that, the game has been drawn after 125 moves. So very interesting, no? So I hope your response was correct. Now let's go to our second position. And the second position has been played by Lilienthal too, against George Marshall Norman. I haven't found any photo of him, so you will be just able to see Lilienthal again. And let's see, is this draw or is this win? Let's see. So Lilienthal has the 2 knights, and Norman is playing with a pawn. So first, don't forget, you need to evaluate if the pawn is on the Müller's line. Next, coordination between the pieces, position of the king. You need to evaluate this all. And when you play chess, you need to be always evaluating everything. So let's go. Here, first thing, let's evaluate this pawn. The pawn is on b3. See our line. The pawn is on b3. Oh, pretty well. The pawn is on the Müller's line. So, because of the fact the pawn is on the Müller's line, we will win this game. No, this is false. Here, Lilienthal is failing in one aspect, two aspects, three aspects. First, the knights aren't coordinated again. 6 years later, again, the same thing. Second, the king isn't controlling the other king. This king isn't stuck on the center. Four aspects. This pawn, okay, is blocked, but okay. How will you coordinate the knights and block the pawn? It isn't possible. So, for this reason, even because of the fact that the pawn is on the Müller's line, you don't have the requisites to win this game. This is draw. Let's see what happened on Lilienthal. 2 games in 6 years, 2 draws for Lilienthal. So he continued like that. But the thing is that the king is always pushing to the center. Talking about the defensive stuff, if you play with the pawn against the 2 knights, of course, first point, you want to give up your pawn. Because if he takes the pawn, oof, the game is a draw. Second, don't push your king to the corner. And are you seeing? Here, okay, the king is on the corner, but he isn't able to do the coordination, to do the opposition, to do the triangulation, and do all this stuff in less than 15 moves. So the game has been drawn. It's a shame. 2 games of Lilienthal and 2 draws. But, well, let's see the third position. Our third position, I don't know if I know how to say this name, has been played by Eugene Alexandrovich Nosko-Borovsky. And his opponent was Jacob Adolf Seitz. So let's evaluate this position. And of course, here we are seeing the points of view of the whites, but we want to play with black, okay? Don't forget all the rules. You're learning advanced stuff. If you have, for example, 1000 rating on the internet and you learned this technique, please tell me. I will be very, very happy to know that I teach you a very advanced thing. So let's go. So here, the last move was knight takes bishop. And first, we want to evaluate, of course, this position. Is this draw or is this one for black? Well, let's evaluate. The pawn is on f4, so the pawn is on the Müller's line. Because of this fact, we will need to evaluate the rest of the pieces. The 2 knights are well coordinated because they can work together. Okay, third aspect, the activation of the kings. This king is on a rank, and this king is more centralized. Yes, it is possible to win this game. It isn't easy, but it is possible. And yes, he has won this possession. Here, Borovsky has lost. So Seitz has won this game. Borovsky was pretty strong. And let's see, king, knight. Of course, here he is trying to win the opposition, and he will try to push the king to the corner. Are you seeing? The knight is controlling those squares. Right now, king, king, and always control the squares. King and king. Controlled again, because this knight and this knight. So, king, king, let's go. Control, 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 control. Everything is controlled. So, and important, while you do the technique, you want to block always the pawn. You don't want to let your opponents advance this pawn because the game will be completely drawn. So, every move you make will need to be very well calculated. And be careful with the stalemates, okay? So king, knight, and now knight again, and he is working the opponent's king. Now, knight controlled, everything controlled, and of course here white will try to draw this game. Our technique, the triangulation. Look, knight, 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 and king. Well, he has made a few moves with the knight. Okay, white could play better, but now the king is near the corner, and we need to do the triangulation. Very, 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 very pretty. So, triangulate, and now you can push the knight, and you can give checkmate. Brilliant sight. Very, very well played. And very important. Again, you need to evaluate every aspect on this game. So, the position of the pawn, so Troitsky or Müller's line, the position of the kings, oppositions, the coordination between the knights, and then you want to reach your pattern. So very, very important. So I hope you enjoyed this video. It was a pretty ambitious video because I have some difficulties, of course, to give these checkmates. And for me, it has been very interesting to study this checkmate pattern because it's one of the most complicated checkmate patterns we have. And because of the fact that I want you to reach a high level, I think that it could be a good idea to put this endgame idea here on this channel. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe, push the like button, and tomorrow I will be waiting for you here at the same hour to see more chess content. Have a good night till tomorrow. Bye bye.